I never thought my life would be measured by the sound of a machine keeping me alive. But here I am, confessing everything, because silence hurts more than words. What really destroyed me wasn't the stroke itself. It was what I discovered after it. I woke up in the hospital, surrounded by the sharp smell of disinfectant and the endless beeping of machines. The first thing I noticed was that my right arm wouldn't move. I tried lifting it, but it felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. The nurse leaned over and said quietly, "You've had a stroke." My throat was dry, and my heart pounded like it was trying to break free from my chest. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a broken whisper. The fluorescent lights above me buzzed softly, mixing with the sound of my shallow breathing. I turned my head and saw a glass of water on the tray table, condensation sliding down the side. It looked so simple, so reachable, yet I couldn't grab it. That's when reality hit me. My body was no longer mine. "Can you feel this?" the doctor asked, pressing a pen against my hand. I shook my head, tears blurring my vision. My left hand trembled as if it carried all the weight of my helplessness. I heard the squeak of shoes against the hospital floor as someone walked past, laughing faintly outside the door. It felt cruel that the world continued while mine had stopped. My sister walked in with forced optimism. "You're going to be okay," she said too brightly, sitting by the bed. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I could smell her perfume mixed with the sterile odor of the room, and it made me nauseous. I turned my face away. She didn't notice the tears rolling down my cheek. I tried to ask about my job, my apartment, the bills, but the words got stuck. My tongue felt heavy, like it had forgotten its purpose. The nurse adjusted my pillow, whispering, "Rest, you need strength." But rest wasn't what I needed. I needed my life back. The monitor beeped faster as panic crawled up my chest. "Stay calm," the doctor ordered, writing notes without even looking at me. I wanted to grab his arm and force him to see me, not just my chart. But all I could do was lie there, trapped in my own body, feeling smaller with every second. Hours dragged by. The walls seemed to close in on me. The ticking clock above the door mocked me, each second reminding me of what I'd lost. My lips cracked as I whispered to myself, "Why me?" But the room had no answers, only silence heavy enough to suffocate me. When night came, the lights dimmed but the beeping never stopped. I stared at the ceiling, tracing cracks in the paint. My left hand clutched the blanket, desperate to feel control over something, anything. Every sound, the wheels of a cart, a distant cough, the hum of the air conditioner, echoed like a reminder that I wasn't home and maybe never would be. A young intern entered to check my vitals. She smiled politely, but I caught her eyes flickering to my useless arm. I wanted to shout that I wasn't just a patient, that I had dreams, debts, regrets, and unfinished conversations. But my body betrayed me again, giving me only silence. "Try to sleep," the nurse whispered before leaving. The door closed with a soft click, and darkness swallowed me. I pressed my nails into my palm, trying to prove to myself that I was still here, still alive. Pain shot up my arm, but at least it was proof. Proof that I hadn't disappeared completely. The taste of metal lingered in my mouth, probably from the four-tube. I hated it. I hated being here, reduced to numbers and charts, stripped of dignity. My mind kept replaying the moment they told me, stroke. Such a simple word, yet it destroyed everything. As the hours passed, I drifted in and out of uneasy sleep. Each time I woke, I expected it to be a nightmare, but it wasn't. The machines were still there. The smell of antiseptic was still there. My broken body was still there. And then, just before dawn, I realized something that made my blood run cold. No one had told me if I would ever walk again. We tell emotional and inspiring stories about life's toughest battles, moments of illness, struggle, recovery, love, and loss. Not every story has a happy ending, but each one carries a powerful message of strength, hope, and humanity. Subscribe to discover moving stories that touch the heart and stay with you forever. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, cutting the room into stripes of light and shadow. I hated how beautiful it looked, because beauty felt wasted on me now. The nurse pulled the curtains halfway, saying softly, "A new day." But to me it wasn't new. It was just another endless repetition of loss. I watched dust float in the light beam, moving freely, and envied even that. My left hand fumbled with the blanket as I tried to sit up. The effort made my chest tighten, sweat gathering at my temples. I thought, maybe if I force myself, I'll recover faster. But the moment I tried moving my right leg, it was like pushing against a wall that wouldn't budge. My body refused, reminding me cruelly that hope was just another trap. The physical therapist entered later, carrying a clipboard. "We'll start small," she said. Her voice was calm, professional, almost too calm for my storming mind. She lifted my arm gently, guiding it like a puppet. I wanted to scream, "That's mine, not yours," but I couldn't even raise it on my own. She smiled, as if I should be proud of this humiliating display. After she left, I stared at the ceiling, my heart pounding with frustration. I remembered the last time I had run freely, just 2 weeks before, chasing the bus on a rainy morning, laughing breathlessly as I caught it at the last second. My shoes were soaked, my hair a mess, but I felt alive. Now, just sitting up was a mountain I couldn't climb. My sister came back with a small plastic bag. "I brought your phone," she said, placing it carefully on the bedside table. My heart lifted for a moment. Connection to the outside world, to the life I thought I still had. But when I unlocked it, dozens of unread messages glared at me, each demanding something I couldn't give. Rent, deadlines, meetings. I threw the phone onto the bed, feeling the weight of reality crush me all over again. Later, a doctor entered with what looked like good news. "Your scan shows improvement," he said, flipping through papers. My chest filled with warmth, the tiniest flicker of hope. I asked, voice trembling, "So, I'll recover?" He looked at me over his glasses and muttered, "It's too early to say." The hope shattered before it even took form, leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. When the nurse brought me lunch, the tray rattled as she set it down. The soup smelled faintly of chicken, but it was lukewarm. I tried holding the spoon with my left hand, but it shook uncontrollably, spilling drops onto the sheets. "Do you need help?" she asked gently. I forced a smile and said, "No," but inside I wanted to vanish. The humiliation was louder than my words. That night, I dreamed I was walking again. I felt the pavement under my shoes, the wind brushing my face. I woke up smiling, only to realize I was still trapped in this body. Tears rolled down into my pillow. Dreams had become my enemy. They gave me what reality took away. The next morning, the therapist returned. She clapped her hands cheerfully. "Progress is slow, but you're stronger today." I forced a nod. Inside, I hated her optimism. Stronger? I couldn't even lift a spoon without spilling it. Her words felt like lies wrapped in kindness. Hours dragged like years. The hallway echoed with footsteps and muffled conversations. Every time the door creaked open, I expected news, any news, that would set me free from this nightmare. But it was always another routine check, another reminder that recovery wasn't promised. My sister sat silently in the chair, scrolling through her phone. The screen's glow reflected on her tired face. I wanted to ask, "Why aren't you looking at me?" But maybe she couldn't bear it either. Maybe my broken body was too much for her, too. That silence between us was heavier than any diagnosis. In the late afternoon, a social worker visited, talking about rehabilitation centers, home care, long-term plans. Her words blurred together, but one phrase hit me like a hammer. Some patients never regain independence. I felt my stomach twist, nausea rising. Was that going to be me? Dependent forever? That night, as I lay staring at the ceiling, I whispered to myself, maybe tomorrow will be better. But deep down, I already knew tomorrow would only bring another kind of pain. I was born in a small apartment that always smelled like boiled rice and laundry soap, the kind that clung to curtains and hair for days. My mother worked double shifts mending uniforms at a dry cleaner, fingers pricked and bandaged, and my father rotated nights at a warehouse where pallets thundered like distant storms. We didn't talk about dreams much. We talked about rent, about coupons, about which shoes could last another winter if we stuffed the toes with newspaper. I learned early to read the mood of a room by the sound of a sigh and the weight of a silence, and I wore my good behavior like armor. At school, I discovered running, not track trophies or podiums, just the feeling of pavement slapping rhythm under my feet, lungs biting cold air at dawn. Running gave me a shape inside the chaos, a tempo that was mine. Teachers said I had focus, that I was disciplined, a word that tasted like chalk. At home, I was the one who remembered the bills on the fridge, the doctor slips, the coupon days. My sister, Lena, laughed louder, cried harder, lived messier. I envied her freedom, even as I envied the way our mother forgave it. When I was 13, my father's blood pressure spiked. I remember the cuff hissing in the clinic, the nurse frowning, the pamphlets about salt and stress that we buried under grocery lists. He switched to decough that he hated and said he felt fine. That cursed, ordinary word people say when they're not. We cut our dinners with more rice and less stew, and he kept going to the warehouse because stopping would mean questions none of us could afford. I tucked the fear into the back of my throat and learned how to swallow it. I got my first job at a bakery that opened at 5 a.m., flour dusting my hair like winter. The owner, Mrs. Park, taught me to listen. Dough talks, ovens whisper, timers lie. I liked the ritual. Scales, scoops, the thud of proofed loaves onto metal sheets, clean steps I could control. "You're steady," she said once, and I kept the compliment the way other girls kept love notes. On Saturdays, I brought home day-old rolls, and we ate them warm with butter, the kind of luxury you don't name in case it disappears. College wasn't a given. It was a negotiation with bills, scholarships, bus routes, and part-time shifts. I studied communications because it felt like learning the architecture of attention, how words move people, how silence moves them more. Lena borrowed my sweaters and my charger and sometimes my ATM card. "I'll pay you back," she'd say, and sometimes she did, with a coffee, with a hug, with a story that made us both forget the math for an hour. We were two halves of a plan neither of us had time to write down. My first office job was a gray box with a window that looked onto another gray box, a city of rectangles and deadlines. I became the person who said yes to early decks, to late revisions, to weekend quick favors that filled entire Sundays. The office smelled like burnt coffee and whiteboard markers, fluorescent lights giving everyone the same anxious complexion. "You're a lifesaver," my boss would say, and I'd float for a moment on that cheap helium before sinking back into my chair. I dated someone serious once, Evan, who kept plants alive and texted me pictures of sunsets like proof that beauty existed on weekdays. He wanted dinners without laptops, vacations without Wi-Fi. I wanted to want those things, but my calendar kept eating the corners of my life. When we split, he said, "You don't leave room for being human." I replied, "I don't have room not to." We hugged like people who'd both been good and still failed, and then we put our separate lives back on like coats. The headache started as weather reports behind my eyes, pressure systems that moved in with storms. I told myself they were screen time, dehydration, the wrong pillow. I bought blue light glasses, a better water bottle, magnesium gummies with cheerful labels. The pharmacy aisle became a map of small denials. Once in a clinic, the cuff hissed around my arm and the nurse's eyebrows climbed. "It's high," she said. "I'm under a lot of stress," I answered, as if stress were a temporary house guest and not a lease I'd signed years ago. Money was a series of almosts. I almost had savings until the car needed brakes. I almost booked a trip until my mother's dental work. Lena almost paid me back until her hours got cut. I told myself we were a team, that families are elastic, that generosity is a kind of investment. I tracked every expense in a spreadsheet that looked like a confession. On nights I couldn't sleep, I scrolled real estate listings I couldn't afford, the way some people scroll old lovers' photos, and felt the same hollow ache. The week before the stroke, I ran for a bus and felt the world tilt, just a fraction, like a painting hung slightly crooked. I laughed it off, breathless, because my brain didn't yet know how to use fear correctly. At work, we launched something big, and I stayed until the office turned into a submarine. Hums, clicks, the glow of monitors in a sea of dark. I microwaved noodles at midnight, ate them standing, and told myself I was building a life. I didn't hear what my body was already shouting through its teeth. The night before the ambulance, I cleaned my apartment like guests were coming. Changed sheets, lined up shoes, emptied the trash, habits of control masquerading as self-care. Lena called to ask if she could float a bill on my card until Friday. I said yes and opened my laptop to check the balance. Felt a small lightening behind my left eye and thought later. I drank cold coffee that tasted like a dare and set 2 alarms because morning had started forgetting me. The morning of the stroke, I woke to the alarm bleeding like a stubborn animal. I stood, or tried to, and the right side of my body staged a quiet mutiny. The glass on my nightstand looked far away and then too close. When it slipped, it shattered into polite, glittering pieces on the rug. "Hey," I said to the empty room, as if talking to a stranger who'd bumped me. "Hey, careful." I crawled the way you do in dreams, dialed badly, slurred my address to a voice that stayed steady while mine fell apart, and watched dust float in the air like indifferent stars. In the ambulance, I learned the sound of urgency as a language. Velcro ripping, plastic snapping, numbers spoken like prayers to machines I didn't believe in. At the hospital, fluorescent lights became constellations, and the word stroke landed with the soft finality of a door that had been closing for years. My life wasn't a before and after. It was a long corridor of small choices, some generous, some cowardly, many tired, all human. And now, laid out under beeping proof that I still existed, I understood the cruel math. Everything I had built could be used to argue I wasn't fit to keep it. The next day began with the sharp sound of a monitor alarm. A nurse rushed in, pressing buttons, adjusting tubes, her face tense. My chest tightened, thinking it was me, thinking I was slipping away. But it was just a sensor loose on my arm. She smiled faintly. Nothing serious. For her, it was routine. For me, it was terror that left my heart racing long after she left. Lying there, I began to think about the cracks in my life long before the stroke. The missed doctor appointments. The headaches I dismissed as stress. The nights I drowned my exhaustion in cheap takeout and endless overtime. I thought I was unstoppable. Now, I realized I had been crumbling for years, and I never saw it. Memories flooded in. I saw myself in my small apartment, rushing every morning, spilling coffee on my shirt, cursing at the clock. I lived like every second was borrowed but never stopped to ask, borrowed from what? Or from whom? That life, so frantic and relentless, had led me here. The irony was unbearable. My sister returned with fresh clothes folded neatly in her bag. She sat by the bed and said softly, "I told you to slow down." Her voice carried no judgment, only sadness. But I still felt accused. I wanted to shout, "You don't understand." But maybe she did. Maybe she had seen this coming, while I was too blind to notice. A doctor entered with 2 interns. He spoke about me as though I wasn't there. Right-sided weakness, speech difficulties, prognosis uncertain. His words were clinical, detached. I stared at the floor, at the scuff marks on his shoes, and wondered how many lives those shoes had walked past, never stopping long enough to see the person behind the diagnosis. Later, the physical therapist came again. She held my hand firmly, guiding it toward a rubber ball. "Squeeze it," she said. My fingers barely twitched. I felt like a child learning to move again, except this wasn't new. It was loss. Each failure stabbed deeper, as if my own body was mocking me. By the afternoon, exhaustion swallowed me. I drifted in and out of sleep, haunted by dreams of running, laughing, living. Waking up felt like drowning. The hospital room was too quiet. too sterile. The walls pressed against me, and the faint hum of machines seemed louder, heavier, more suffocating than ever. Around evening, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my boss. "Take your time to recover, but we'll need to discuss your position soon." I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. Even here, half paralyzed, I was being reminded of deadlines and responsibilities. The world didn't pause for me. It never would. I tried to reply, my trembling hand sliding across the keyboard, but halfway through typing, my fingers froze. I deleted the message and tossed the phone aside. My job wasn't just slipping away. It was already gone. I could feel it, like sand slipping through clenched fists. That night, my sister whispered, "You're not alone." But I didn't believe her. Loneliness sat heavy in my chest, heavier than the stroke itself. People could be in the room, but they couldn't feel what I felt. The silence inside my own body, the prison of a body that no longer obeyed. I stared at the Ford drip, watching each drop fall into the tube. It reminded me of time, dripping away, unstoppable. Each drop a second I couldn't reclaim, a second stolen by this cruel twist of fate. I closed my eyes, wishing I could rewind, even just 1 year, and make different choices. The nurse came in quietly, adjusting the monitor. She smiled kindly. "You're strong." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to see strength in myself. But all I saw was weakness, failure, regret. I turned my face to the wall, pretending to sleep so she wouldn't see the tears. And then, just as I was drifting off, I overheard 2 nurses whispering outside my door. One said, "She's not improving as fast as they hoped." The other replied, "Some don't make it back." My blood froze. They were talking about me. The next morning, a nurse wheeled me down the hallway for my first group therapy session. The wheels squeaked with every turn, echoing off the sterile white walls. I felt like cargo being transported, not a person. Other patients passed by, some walking with canes, others in chairs like mine. Their eyes met mine briefly, then slid away, as if they couldn't bear to see their own reflection in me. When we entered the therapy room, the smell of disinfectant mixed with faint sweat and cafeteria coffee. A therapist clapped her hands cheerfully. "We're here to help each other," she announced. I hated her voice. Too bright. Too false. She didn't understand the weight I carried inside. They placed a spoon in front of me, asking me to lift it. My left hand shook violently, the spoon clattering onto the table. The sound rang out like a gunshot. Everyone stared. My face burned, my throat tight. One patient chuckled quietly, and I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. "It's okay, try again," the therapist encouraged. But it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. I tried again, but my hand betrayed me. The spoon slipped, soup spilling onto my lap. The warmth soaked into the hospital gown, staining it. My cheeks burned hotter than the soup. I couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Afterward, they wheeled me back to my room. The silence was suffocating. I heard faint laughter from the corridor, patients bonding, nurses chatting. But in my room, the only sound was the beeping machine beside me, like a cruel reminder that I needed it to stay alive. My sister walked in later, holding a sandwich wrapped in foil. She smiled, too hopeful, too forced. "I thought you might like this." I tried to unwrap it with my left hand, fumbling, dropping crumbs on the sheets. "Let me help," she offered, reaching over. I snapped, "I can do it." My voice cracked, filled with shame and fury. The sandwich slipped from my hand and landed on the floor. She froze, hurt flashing in her eyes. For a moment, I wanted to apologize. But instead, I turned away, staring at the wall. The silence stretched, thick and unbearable. She picked up the sandwich quietly, whispered, "I'll bring another tomorrow," and left. The door clicked shut, and the loneliness stabbed deeper than any pain. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound amplified. The ticking clock, the distant cough, the hum of fluorescent lights. My mind replayed the group session, the laughter, the stairs, the soup on my lap. Over and over, like a punishment I couldn't escape. Around midnight, I pressed the call button. A nurse appeared, her eyes tired. "I can't sleep," I whispered. She nodded, adjusted my blanket, and said softly, "Try counting your breaths." Then she left. Counting breaths didn't help. Each breath felt heavier, as if the air itself didn't want to stay inside me. The next day, a young intern visited. She smiled nervously, clipboard in hand. "How are you feeling?" I wanted to answer honestly, humiliated, broken, invisible. But instead, I said, "Fine." The lie tasted bitter, sticking in my throat like ash. She checked my pulse, jotting notes quickly. Her pen scratched against the paper, louder than it should have been. I watched her hand move, envying the simplicity of it. Control, fluidity, something I no longer had. When she left, the room felt emptier than before. My sister returned again, quieter this time. She sat without speaking, scrolling on her phone. I wanted her to talk to me, to fill the silence. But I couldn't ask. Words stuck in my throat, heavy and sharp. So we just sat, the only sounds the clicks of her screen and my uneven breathing. And as the evening shadows stretched across the room, I realized something terrifying. Silence wasn't just around me. It was inside me. A silence growing so vast it could swallow me whole. The next morning began with voices outside my door. 2 nurses spoke in hushed tones, their words muffled but sharp enough to cut through my half-sleep. "She won't recover quickly," one whispered. "Her family should start preparing." My chest tightened. Preparing for what? For a life of dependence, or for the end? When they entered, their smiles were too practiced, their voices too soft. "Good morning," they chimed, adjusting my fluffing the pillow. But I had heard the truth already. Their kindness felt like a mask. Behind it, I imagined pity, or worse, resignation. My sister came later, her steps hesitant, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. She placed a bag on the chair. "I spoke with a social worker," she said. "They mentioned long-term care options." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. Long-term care? I stared at her, my pulse racing. Was she giving up on me already? "I don't need that," I managed, my voice hoarse. "I'll recover." She looked away, fiddling with the zipper of her jacket. Silence stretched between us. I knew what she was thinking but couldn't bear to hear it. "What if you don't?" Later that day, I was wheeled into therapy again. The therapist encouraged me to stand with assistance. My legs trembled violently, collapsing almost immediately. I fell against the bars, my head smacking the cushion. A sharp laugh echoed from across the room, a young man in recovery watching me. The therapist shot him a look, but the damage was done. My humiliation was complete. Back in my room, I stared at the ceiling, replaying that laugh over and over. It was sharper than any needle, crueler than any pain. I realized recovery wasn't just about fighting my body. It was about surviving the eyes of others, the judgment, the silent verdict that I was already lost. That night, my sister whispered something while she thought I was asleep. She sat in the chair, phone pressed to her ear. "I don't know how long I can do this," she said softly. "Maybe a facility would be better." My throat closed. She was talking about sending me away. I wanted to shout, to demand she never abandon me, but my voice failed. Tears slid down my cheeks into the pillow, unseen, unshed. The betrayal stung more than the paralysis itself. If even she was ready to let go, what chance did I have? The next morning, a new nurse arrived. Different, colder. She checked my chart quickly, barely meeting my eyes. When she left, I heard her outside. "These cases rarely improve. She'll be bedbound soon." Her words cut through me like broken glass. My phone buzzed with a message from my boss again. This time it was blunt. "We'll need to replace you if you can't return by next month." Replace me. Just like that. Not a person, not years of loyalty, just a position to be filled. I dropped the phone onto the sheets, my heart heavy with rage and despair. Isolation became a living thing in that room. The walls pressed closer every day. Even when people visited, I felt invisible, reduced to whispers, predictions, pity. The silence between their words was louder than anything else. I pressed the call button one night, desperate just to hear another human voice. The nurse arrived, irritated. "What is it now?" she snapped. I froze, ashamed, muttered, "Nothing." She rolled her eyes and left. I lay in the dark, the humiliation burning hotter than the 4 in my arm. And that's when I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just sick, I was becoming disposable. The morning light felt colder that day, as if even the sun had lost interest in warming me. A nurse entered briskly, carrying a clipboard. She checked my vitals, then whispered something into her recorder. I strained to listen, but all I caught was, "Condition stable, but unlikely." That last word clung to me like poison. When she left, I reached for my phone with my trembling hand. It slipped twice before I finally unlocked it. My bank app opened, and my stomach dropped. Transactions I didn't remember stared back at me. Withdrawals, payments, amounts larger than anything I'd approved. My heart pounded. Who had access to my account? I called my sister into the room, voice shaking. "Did you use my card?" She blinked, caught off guard. "I only paid a bill or two. You told me to handle things." My chest tightened. Had I? Maybe I had, in the haze of hospital days. Or maybe she was using my silence, my weakness. "I didn't say you could take that much," I whispered, my voice cracking. She looked away, frowning. "I'm doing everything for you. Don't make this harder." Her words stung, sharper than the 4 needle in my arm. I wanted to trust her. I needed to trust her. But a shadow of doubt spread through me. Later that afternoon, I overheard her outside the room again. "She won't get back to work," she said on the phone. "We'll have to plan for permanent care and her finances." Her finances. My finances. My fists clenched weakly around the blanket. Was she planning my life without me? Or planning her own life with what was left of mine? That evening, a doctor visited with the social worker. They spoke in calm, measured voices about options, rehabilitation centers, assisted living, guardianship papers. Guardianship. I repeated, my throat dry. "It's standard if recovery doesn't progress," the social worker explained, smiling too gently. "Standard for them. Catastrophe for me." My sister avoided my eyes the whole time, tapping her fingers nervously on the armrest. I wanted to grab her hand and demand honesty, but my strength failed. The words stayed locked in my chest, heavy as lead. When night came, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every moment. Her whispers, the withdrawals, the talk of guardianship. Was I losing not only my body, but also my freedom? The thought made my skin crawl. Around midnight, I heard 2 nurses whispering again in the hallway. "Her sister's pushing for papers," one said. "If she gets them, she'll have full control." My blood turned to ice. They were talking about me, about my life being signed away while I lay helpless in this bed. Rage simmered inside me, stronger than the paralysis. I wasn't dead. I wasn't gone. Yet they were treating me like a corpse with a beating heart. I tried to sit up, to scream, to force the world to hear me, but my body betrayed me again. My eyes darted to the small mirror on the wall. For a moment, I didn't recognize the person staring back, pale, broken, fragile. But in that reflection, I also saw something else, a flicker of defiance. They wanted me weak. They wanted me silent. And maybe, just maybe, that was the one thing I couldn't let happen. The next morning, my sister walked in with forced cheer. "I brought your favorite coffee," she said, placing the cup on the table. The smell hit me, rich, bitter, familiar. But it tasted like betrayal now. I sipped slowly, pretending calm, while my mind screamed, "What else are you hiding from me?" And that was the moment I understood. My biggest fight wasn't just against my broken body. It was against the people waiting in the shadows to take everything I still had left. I remember the first morning they finally let me stand up. My legs were trembling like branches in a storm, but I was smiling inside because I thought, this is it, I'm coming back. The nurse stood close, holding me under the arm, whispering, "Take your time." I took 2 steps, and the whole hallway clapped for me. Even strangers, even other patients in wheelchairs. I wanted to cry from relief. For a moment, I thought the nightmare was ending. My family came that evening. My brother brought me my favorite snack, fried tofu with chili sauce, and he placed it on the small table by my bed. "You're walking again," he said, his eyes wet. My mother stroked my hair like when I was a child. I let myself believe it. I imagined I'd go home in weeks, that soon I'd be back to cooking my own meals, washing my clothes, breathing fresh air outside the hospital walls. I even pictured myself laughing again. But that night, the headache returned, sharp, stabbing, like knives inside my skull. I pressed the button for the nurse, my hands shaking, sweat soaking my shirt. She injected something to ease the pain, but the relief didn't come. Instead, my body felt heavy, my vision blurred, and I remember gasping, "Something's wrong." Her face changed instantly. She called for help, and suddenly the room was full of rushing feet, alarms, voices colliding in panic. I don't remember much after that moment. Only fragments, someone holding my jaw open, another voice shouting numbers, the metallic taste of something in my mouth. When I woke up hours later, the light from the window was dim, and I realized I couldn't feel the left side of my face anymore. My lips sagged, my eye drooped. I touched my cheek and cried silently. The little hope I had built crumbled in one night. The doctor came in the next morning with that careful tone they use when they don't want to scare you. But you know the truth is bad. He said, it was another stroke, weaker, but damaging. He talked about rehabilitation, about patience, about small victories. I didn't hear most of it. My ears were ringing. All I could think was, how do you fight twice against something that already broke you once? For a while, I pretended I believed him. I let my friends visit, and I smiled when they said, "You look better." I forced myself to eat even when the food tasted like metal. I told everyone I was stronger now. But deep inside, every time I touched my own face and felt the drooping skin, I knew the truth. I was not healing. I was falling apart slowly, and nobody wanted to say it aloud. Then came the betrayal that cut deeper than the illness. I discovered that the company I had worked for over 20 years had already replaced me. No calls, no visits, no messages. My position filled within weeks of my stroke. A colleague whispered it to me when he stopped by. He said, "I thought you knew." My chest burned, not from sickness, but from humiliation. 20 years of loyalty erased by 1 month in a hospital bed. I had imagined returning to my desk, to the routine of papers and meetings. Maybe slower, maybe different, but still useful. That dream vanished instantly. I stared at the ceiling that night, and for the first time, I wondered if my life was already finished, even though my heart was still beating. What use was I if my body betrayed me and my work discarded me? My mother tried to cheer me. She said, "They don't deserve you. We still need you here." But her words couldn't fill the hole inside me. I saw pity in her eyes when she fed me soup, when she buttoned my shirt, when she cleaned the drool from my mouth. That pity killed me more than the stroke itself. I wanted to scream, "I'm still me." But the words came out broken, slurred, pathetic. The nurses, too, began treating me differently. Before, they spoke to me like a fighter, encouraging me. After the second stroke, their voices softened, like I was already half gone. One of them even said, "You should focus on comfort, not recovery." That sentence haunted me. Comfort? Was that all my life was now? Waiting quietly for death in a bed that smelled of disinfectant and old sweat? Yet a part of me clung to the idea of rising again. I told myself, maybe this was the bottom. Maybe tomorrow would bring something brighter. I prayed in silence, not to any god, but to the beating inside my chest that refused to stop. Each morning, I checked if I could lift my arm, if my leg responded. Sometimes they did, a twitch, a tremor, and I convinced myself it meant progress. But progress never lasted. Each spark of strength was followed by a darker setback, another headache, another fall, another humiliation of soiling myself because I couldn't move fast enough. Each time I thought, this is the end of hope. My body was a prison, and the key was thrown away somewhere I could never reach. And just when I thought nothing else could break me further, someone I loved most shattered me completely, with words I will never forget. The morning I decided to confront them, my hands shook more than they ever had during therapy. Not from weakness, but from anticipation, the kind that makes your chest twist and your stomach knot. I rehearsed what I would say over and over, whispering to the sterile walls of my hospital room as if they were my audience. I was terrified and alive in the same breath. My sister arrived first, as she always did, with that habitual nervous smile. I looked at her and said nothing at first, just studied her face. Every shadow, every hesitation, every flicker of guilt or pride, I memorized it. She tilted her head, sensing the change. What is it?" she asked softly, unsure. "I need the truth," I said, voice cracking but firm. My words hung between us like a blade. She froze, and I could see her trying to measure the space between honesty and protection. The money, the decisions, the guardianship. Why? I continued. She swallowed hard, eyes darting away. I hated how much power she had over me, simply by being able to answer or not. "I did it for you," she whispered finally, the words hanging weak and fragile. I thought I was helping. Her voice was small, but the weight of her betrayal pressed like iron. Helping? Was this help? Taking control of my finances, my life, my autonomy? I felt every injustice I had endured crashing down, coiling around my chest. I shook my head, trying to fight back tears. Helping? You decided for me. While I was lying here, fighting to breathe and move again, you decided my life wasn't yours to live. Silence fell, thicker than any wall, until even the hospital machines seemed to pause. Later that day, I confronted the doctor and social worker. I asked bluntly about guardianship papers, about their assessments, about what I hadn't been told. They recited policies, procedures, clinical reasons, but each word sounded hollow, like a chorus rehearsed to justify taking away a human being's right to fight for themselves. I felt anger rise so sharply it left me breathless. "You are underestimating me," I said finally, my voice steadier than I expected. "I am not your case study. I am not a file. I am a person, and I will not let anyone dictate the terms of my survival." My declaration hung in the air, echoing louder than any monitors. My sister tried to interrupt, to soften, to explain, but I didn't let her. "Don't. You will speak later when you can say it honestly, without hiding behind love or fear. Today, I confront the truth." Each word was painful, but necessary. Each was a reclaiming of my dignity. By evening, I called my colleagues and even my boss. I asked the questions I had feared for weeks. About replacement, about policies, about whether anyone had truly considered my recovery. Their hesitation, their avoidance, made my stomach churn, but I didn't let it intimidate me. I demanded answers. I demanded acknowledgement of my life's work. They stumbled through words, offered apologies that rang hollow. But I realized that confrontation was not about making them suffer. It was about anchoring myself in my own power. Every hesitated syllable, every shifty glance, I absorbed as proof of my own survival, not evidence of my defeat. That night, I returned to my room alone. My body ached, my muscles screamed, but my spirit burned. I stared at the ceiling, remembering every humiliation, every betrayal, every quiet moment I thought I was invisible. Now I was not invisible. I was visible, angry, alive, and refusing to be erased. For the first time, I spoke aloud to the room, to myself, to anyone who might be listening. I am here. I am standing. I am reclaiming every inch of myself that you thought you could take. My voice cracked and soared, echoing against the sterile walls, resonating like a bell I had been holding inside for months. And as I finally collapsed back into my bed, exhausted but unbroken, I realized that confrontation was not the end. It was the bridge to the final step. The step toward liberation, toward life, toward reclaiming what truly mattered: dignity, autonomy, and the quiet, indestructible truth that I still belonged to myself. I woke up to the sound of the morning monitor beeping softly, a rhythm I had hated and loved equally. My left hand was numb, but my right grasped the bed rail like an anchor. I realized I had spent weeks clinging to the edges of myself, afraid to fall, afraid to breathe too loudly, afraid to hope. Today felt different. The air wasn't heavier, but I felt it filling me instead of suffocating me. The first step out of bed was unsteady, a tremor in every muscle. I closed my eyes, counting the seconds it took to move my feet one in front of the other. And then, against all predictions, my body obeyed. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but it obeyed. I felt a rush of triumph so sharp it burned, almost like fire in my veins. I could still fight. My sister arrived, unaware of the miracle unfolding. She smiled, brought the usual coffee, and found me standing, wobbling but upright. I looked at her, tears welling, and whispered, "I can do this now. I can stand." She froze, incredulous, then laughed through tears. "You really can." For the first time in months, I saw her hope mirror mine instead of pity. Physical therapy became less of a trial and more of a battlefield I could win. Every exercise, every attempt at movement, was no longer a humiliating chore, but a declaration: I am still here, still me, still human. The therapists noticed it too, their smiles genuine now, their encouragement no longer a mask of professional kindness but recognition of raw, stubborn life. That evening, I looked in the small mirror by the sink. My face was uneven. My body still betrayed me in subtle ways, but my eyes burned with clarity. I had survived betrayal, humiliation, and near loss. I had been invisible, disposable, written off, but I was still breathing, still fighting, still demanding to exist on my terms. My mother brought a blanket and sat beside me, holding my hand gently. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. I squeezed hers back, understanding now that her love had never been pity. It had been patience, quiet, steady. And I finally saw that my sister's difficult choices, the hard truths, were part of a love too complex for me to recognize before. For the first time, I confronted my feelings about the people who had abandoned me. The company, colleagues, and even friends who didn't visit. I let the anger come and go without swallowing it whole. I didn't need revenge, not anymore. I only needed to reclaim what remained mine. My body, my mind, my life. Days became weeks, and each small victory stacked like bricks under my feet. I learned to walk again without support, my steps faltering but persistent. I learned to speak clearly, to eat without spilling, to look people in the eye without flinching. Each act was a reclamation of dignity, a refusal to let illness define my story. Then came the moment I had been dreading and longing for simultaneously, returning to my apartment. I felt the fresh air on my face, smelled the faint aroma of city streets, heard the distant hum of life continuing without me. And yet, I was part of it again. My life wasn't reset. It was rebuilt, fractured but stronger in the places it had been tested. That night, I journaled my thoughts, as I had before the stroke. But the words were different. They weren't confessions of weakness. They were proclamations of survival. I wrote, I lived through betrayal. I lived through loss. I lived through humiliation. And I am still standing. The page reflected not just my scars, but my strength. I realized, painfully and beautifully, that life had no guarantees. Each breath could be the last. Each heartbeat could falter. But within that fragility lay freedom. The freedom to choose dignity, to face the truth, to hold hope even when it seems impossible. I could not change the past, but I could fight for every tomorrow. Looking back, I understood the real lesson. Survival isn't just physical. It is emotional, spiritual in its rawest form, human in its essence. To survive is to forgive yourself for weakness, to embrace strength you didn't know existed, and to step forward even when the world seems to conspire against you. And so I invite you, listening now, to take your own hand and hold it firmly. Life is fragile, unpredictable, often cruel. But it is yours. Tell your story. Share your pain. Let someone else see that survival is possible, that dignity can be restored, that hope can bloom again, even from the ruins.